Did you know that 85% of people find dark rooms to be the scariest part of their home? But what if it's not the darkness you should fear, but the secrets hidden behind a door that's always locked? And if curiosity drives you there, are you prepared to face what's waiting inside? Welcome to I Felt the Dark, a horror story that will make it hard for you to sleep tonight. This time, we're uncovering a chilling mystery behind an old house with one room that's always locked, a forbidden place full of secrets. Are you brave enough to step deeper into this tale? If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more thrilling tales that will keep your heart racing. When he was a child, David grew up in an old Victorian-era house on the outskirts of a small town in England, a quaint village called Haworth in West Yorkshire. The house was grand but eerily quiet, too quiet. At the end of the hallway on the second floor, there was one door that was always firmly shut. The dark wooden door stood out from the others. It bore no decoration, just a tarnished brass handle. Every time David asked about it, his parents would only give a brief response. Never open that door, David. Never. Young David didn't dare disobey the warning, but his curiosity never faded. The prohibition seemed to linger in the back of his mind, like something perpetually at the edge of his vision, just out of reach. Sometimes, at night, when the house grew completely silent, David would hear faint sounds coming from behind that door. They sounded like whispers, or maybe it was just the wind. But in that house, the wind rarely moved in such an unsettling way. Once, David tried to peek through the small gap under the door. He thought he saw a shadow moving inside. He pulled away as quickly as possible, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step he took away from the door felt like a struggle against something unseen. Now, as a teenager, David still remembers that feeling vividly. It wasn't just the mystery behind the door that haunted his thoughts. It was a deeper question. Why were his parents so afraid of that door? Old houses, as people often say, have memories. But what if those memories are alive, waiting for the right moment to reveal their darkest secrets? Over time, David's curiosity turned into a deeper fear. He started noticing small details he had never paid attention to before. Why was that hallway always colder than the rest of the house? Why did the family dog, Max, always refuse to go near the door, even when David gently tried to coax him? Even his mother, the usually composed woman, seemed anxious whenever she passed the door. She would quicken her steps, avoiding even glancing at it, as if something unseen was waiting on the other side. When David was 14, there was a night that changed everything. A violent storm hit that evening. Lightning struck, shaking the old house so fiercely that the creaking of its wooden frame echoed through the halls. David woke up to an unusual sound, heavy footsteps, moving slowly down the second-floor hallway. The steps stopped right in front of the forbidden door. Holding his breath, David crept out of bed and peeked from behind his barely open bedroom door. In a flash of lightning, he saw it, a tall, thin shadow standing motionless in front of the door, as if waiting for someone to open it. The next morning, David tried to bring it up with his father, but his reaction was startling. His father immediately cut him off, his face turning pale. "Never talk about this again, David. Never," he said, his voice trembling. The prohibition only deepened the mystery, solidifying David's belief that something lay behind that door, something even his parents were too terrified to confront. His mother, on the other hand, ignored David's account of what he had seen, brushing it off entirely, which only added to his confusion. David tried to forget that night, but the door continued to haunt him. In the nights that followed, he was plagued by nightmares. In those dreams, the door would creak open on its own, and whispers would call his name from the darkness beyond. What lay behind that door? And why did it seem to have a pull on him, refusing to let him move on no matter how hard he tried to forget? Now, at 16, standing in front of the door, David felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. He was older now, alone in the aging house that was slowly succumbing to time. One thing was certain, the mystery wasn't going to let him go that easily. Was he brave enough to face what had once terrified his family? Or should the door remain locked forever? The question echoed in his mind as he reached for the tarnished brass handle. David stood frozen in the doorway, his heart pounding in his chest, hesitation gripping him as he contemplated whether to open it. When he finally did, the room beyond was dark, illuminated only by the pale light of the moon filtering through a small, dusty window on the far wall. A damp, musty smell mixed with the scent of old wood filled his nose. The walls were covered in photographs from floor to ceiling. They depicted families, faces from the past, some unfamiliar, but others unmistakably his own. The faces in the photographs were still, yet their eyes seemed to follow his every move, as though watching each step he took. He tried to convince himself it was just a trick of the light, the moonlight reflecting off the glass frames. But the longer he stared at the photos, the clearer it became. This was no illusion. Even when he moved to another corner of the room, the eyes remained locked on him, alive yet void of any emotion. Trembling, David approached one of the older photos. Its colors faded into sepia tones. In it, he saw a boy who looked eerily like himself, a pale face with a terrified expression. Just as he reached out to touch the frame, the air in the room changed. A faint sound began to echo, like whispers coming from the dark corners of the room. At first, he couldn't make out what they were saying, but slowly, one voice grew distinct, louder than the rest.
You shouldn't be here, David. Why are you doing it? Go away. Go.
You shouldn't be here. Panic surged through him, and he staggered backward. His trembling hands causing the old key he had been clutching to fall to the floor. Before he could retrieve it, another voice, a deeper, more commanding one, boomed from behind him. The word echoed, as if it were spoken directly into his mind. David spun around, but the room was empty. No one was there, only the walls covered in photos, their unrelenting gazes piercing into him. In a frenzy, he bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind him. But before he could take another step, he heard it, the sound of the doorknob twisting, as if someone inside was trying to open the door. He sprinted to his bedroom, clutching the old key tightly, and locked his own door. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house sounded like approaching footsteps. In the darkness, he felt the presence of something just outside his door, waiting. And in his mind, the whisper repeated over and over.
You shouldn't be here, David.
That night marked the beginning of a series of inexplicable and terrifying events. David tried to forget what he had seen in the forbidden room, but every time he closed his eyes, the haunting images of those photographs resurfaced in his mind, empty eyes staring at him, following him wherever he went. A few days later, while sitting in the living room, David noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the family photos hanging on the wall, a Christmas portrait from a few years ago, had changed. His own face, which had previously been smiling, now appeared pale and somber, just like the boy in the photograph from the forbidden room. His fear deepened when he began hearing footsteps late at night, always stopping right outside his bedroom door. The sound came every night, like a sinister ritual. One particularly nerve-wracking night, David gathered the courage to open his door, but the hallway was empty, dark, and silent. Yet, something chilled him to his core. The old key he had left on his desk was now lying on the floor, directly in front of his door, as if deliberately placed there. Overwhelmed by a mix of fear and unrelenting curiosity, David resolved to return to the forbidden room. He knew it was likely a terrible idea, but he felt compelled to find answers. When he opened the door for the second time, the room looked different. The photographs were no longer on the walls but scattered across the floor, their frames shattered. In the center of the room stood something that hadn't been there before, a decrepit chair facing the window. And on the chair sat a shadowy figure, tall and gaunt, its back turned toward him. "Who's there?" David's voice trembled as he spoke. The figure didn't move, but suddenly, the same deep voice from before echoed throughout the room.
"You've gone too far, David."
Slowly, the figure began to turn its head. Before David could glimpse its face, the lights in the room went out. In total darkness, he heard heavy footsteps approaching him. Panicking, he stepped back, but something brushed against his shoulder, cold and rough, like a hand that didn't belong to anything human. David's scream echoed through the house. He bolted from the room without looking back, slamming the door shut behind him. But just as he thought he was safe, he heard it, a high-pitched giggle, like that of a child playing, followed by the deep, chilling whisper again.
"You're ours now."
David locked himself in his bedroom, his entire body shaking uncontrollably. But that night, something changed. When he glanced at his bedroom mirror, he saw his reflection staring back at him. Yet it wasn't the face he recognized. His eyes, once vibrant, now looked hollow, just like the eyes in the photographs from the forbidden room. And for the first time, David realized something horrifying. Whatever had been trapped in that room was no longer there. It was with him now. Have you ever experienced strange, unexplainable events? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and follow us for more spine-chilling tales that will haunt your nights. Thank you for listening to this horror story on I Felt the Dark. Stay tuned for more terrifying stories to come.